After a difficult journey, you finally lifted the curse of the evil queen and arrived at the high tower where the sleeping princess was imprisoned. The beautiful princess looked shy and quietly lifted her face. At this moment, you gently kiss and awaken the sleeping princess, then embark on a love entanglement that is not recognized by the king. Completion reward. Princess's body *1, several gold coins *1b Princess, come on, I was hired by a dragon. Completion rewards. 1 dragon's treasure, 1 black dragon flight driver's license. C. Slowly pick up the princess and give it to the evil queen. Completion rewards. Sexy Queen *1, Muggle King's Green Hat *1, Sorrento Magic Kingdom *1, Lewis rubbed his face fiercely and hesitated for a moment. In the end, he lowered his head and kissed the princess, slowly picked her up, and went to the queen's bedroom. Princess, come on, I was hired by the dragon. Keywords of the novel. Your Highness, don't be like this. No pop-ups, Your Highness, don't be like this. Download the complete text, Your Highness, don't be like this. Read the latest chapters. Chapter 1. Is right, it's me. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 is right, it's me. Looking at the beautiful lady sitting in the chair, wearing aristocratic stockings, Louis rubbed her face. Should I crawl out from under the bed and say hello to this lady? This doesn't seem like a good idea. He decided to stay under the bed and read a storybook. This is a book called Fantasy Travel Stories, set in the 17th and 18th centuries, featuring magic, wizards, muggles, and dragons. The book tells many strange fairy tales. Suitable as a bedtime story to tell children. But if some bored adults suddenly find this book while tidying up the house, they may also flip through it with curiosity. Then he crossed into the book. Louis is the latter. He flipped the book to the latest page. On this page, the story is about Princess Osticus, who sought refuge at the Royal Academy of Witchcraft and Wizardry in St. Oak to escape the clutches of her stepmother, and became a professor of magic here. But the power of the witch remained entangled. One night, the desperate princess took out the Book of Fate left by her mother and began to pray, hoping that a prince could come and help her. The story ends here, with all the remaining blank spaces. The final paragraph is: someone in the dark heard Oshicles' call, and he decided. A. Enter the story to become a prince, engage in a love-hate entanglement with the princess that will not be recognized by the king and queen, and then watch her marry into the dragon race. Complete rewards. Princess's Body *1, title of Sad Green Hat Prince *1, a book full of touching stories *1, B. Roast. What the hell? Completion reward. Seeing this, Louis's face looked a bit strange. He definitely didn't choose A. Originally, there was no option B here. After finishing reading the book, he threw it aside and cursed, "What the hell is that?" Then he went to bed. After waking up, he appeared under the bed holding the book. And now the additional option B in the book is what I said, "What the hell is that?" So, I was forcibly dragged into this bloody story. I was dragged under the bed of the protagonist, Osticus, by this book. Louis felt that maybe he could go back by flipping through the book again. Obviously impossible. Suddenly, there was an extra line of narration in the book, but Louis had become accustomed to it. In fact, he found that every move he made would be written in this book. I seem to have become a character in the story. Louis missed the princess's body, and the world began to develop in an unpredictable direction. A new story begins. After the narration ended, the book in front of him suddenly turned into a void, floating beside him, and a new narration emerged. At present, Louis has no identity or name, so he has no sense of existence. He must quickly find an identity and let the Book of Fate insert him into this world. Otherwise, he will disappear in front of him. There was one last chance, and he decided, climb out of bed and shout, "That's right, it's me. I'm the prince summoned by you. Suck up, don't change, I like black, start now. Rewards for completion. Osiris's big-eared melon seeds *1, the painful beating of the college night watchman *n, the floor of the dark dungeon *1, and the caresses of the prisoners *1, Your Highness, I have finished cleaning under the bed. Do you have any further instructions? Rewards for completion. Staya Mama's ID card, Fairy, *1, Fairy's knowledge *1, random basic attributes +1, both of these options made Louis feel a chill, especially when he saw the second one. He instinctively touched his lower part, which relieved him. Louis understood a bit, not that he had become a Styrian grandmother now, but that it was up to him to see how he inserted himself into this story. Once selected, one will obtain the corresponding identity and knowledge. It seems like we can only choose between two options. Louis rubbed his face fiercely. After choosing A, his identity as a wanderer will definitely be exposed in prison, and the result is that he will be cleaned up by the prisoners and then sent to the wizard's testing platform. If you choose B, it's like practicing the Sunflower Classic. He suspected that the system was intentionally manipulating him. These two options, one is no front and the other is no back. He doesn't even want to choose. The world has developed in an unpredictable direction, Louis murmured in his heart for a while before thinking, why can't we add an extra option B now? He had an idea and decided to take a gamble, crawling out from under the bed. Osiris was in front of the wardrobe at this moment, frowning as she looked at the full clothes, as if she was struggling with what to wear today. The clothes in the cabinet were all kinds and very fashionable. Which costumes are also diverse in variety. It seems that this is not ancient Europe, but a parallel world similar to Europe. It seemed like she felt something, but Osticus looked back with some confusion and nervously called out, "Who is it?" But she looked for a while but didn't notice anyone, as if she had noticed some dust on the bed. Osticus frowned and walked over to tidy up the sheets. Louis stepped aside and watched helplessly as Oxycris tidied up the sheets in front of him. After finishing, he also dusted the place where Louis had just sat. This scene made Louis's face look strange. It seems that I do not have a sense of existence. I stood in front of her, but she turned a blind eye watching the beautiful lady pouting her buttocks to make the bed. Louis touched her chin and began to think. Just now, when Osticus asked who it was, a choice appeared in front of Louis. It was still the prince who would definitely go to prison. This is definitely not selectable. Louis made more attempts to trigger option C. At first, he walked back and forth, and later even intentionally touched something, but Osticus remained unresponsive. It wasn't until Louis was about to leave the room that he suddenly heard a low cry behind him. Is that Grandma Styria? Are you a real existence, right? I know, you're in the room, don't leave me, okay? The option of Staya Mama appeared in front of Louis, who shook his head and stopped walking. He cannot leave this room. With a sigh, Louis found a chair and sat down, flipping through the storybook. Perhaps it was because Louis didn't answer, or maybe it was because Louis didn't leave the room. After crying for a while, Osiris shook her head and started talking to herself. I'm so foolish. I still believe in the fairy tales my mother told me when I was a child. There is no guardian elf in this world, and no, he will come to help me. After calming her emotions for a while, Osticus wiped away her tears and regained her energy. Before she arrived at the cabinet, she changed her clothes. Today is an important day for her to decide her future destiny, and the Empress Mother will definitely do everything she can to make herself look embarrassed. She can't cry like a little girl anymore. She wants to welcome today's performance with the most perfect posture. Even if she fails, if she wants to marry those dragons, she will still be the princess of the kingdom of Sorrento. On the other hand, after frowning and flipping through the storybook, Louis also discovered some issues. The true name of the storybook is the Book of Fate, summoned by Osiris. In that despair, she gave birth to the last hope in her heart, hoping to change her own destiny, which resonated with the Book of Fate. And the outsider Louis was summoned from this book. He is the person most in line with Osticus's imagination. There are many conditions, such as being born in a certain year or month, what zodiac sign, and so on, and various fantasies of little girls. Of course, the chronology, ecliptic, and constellations of different worlds are different, so these conditions ultimately only become one. Tall and handsome. So Louis was selected. Now, because Louis rejected the identity of the sad green hat prince and chose a non-existent option B, he appeared in this world with an unknown identity. And now the storybook believes that there is a reason to appear in this room, except for the thief, which is the non-existent Stiamama, so the storybook has been trying to define Louis as these two characters. How can I break the identity assigned to me by the narrator? Being manipulated by the system doesn't mean much. Louis frowned and thought about the two words mentioned earlier in the book. 1. Find an identity, 2. Insert into this world. It suddenly started to drizzle outside, and Osiris ran to the balcony and brought in a few clothes. Those clothes were all washed by Osiris herself, and there seemed to be a few slightly smaller wizard costumes, which looked like the school uniform for the girls in the college. After folding her school uniform, Osticus sat back in front of the dressing table and combed her long hair. At this moment, a beautiful girl of 16 or 17 years old dressed as a witch pushed the door into the bedroom and hugged Osticus from behind. "Don't make a fuss, Helen." Osticus broke Helen's hand and turned her head. "Have you reviewed your homework? If you don't pass the wizard assessment today, I will definitely hit you." Helen stuck out her tongue and took Osiris's comb, combing her sister's hair. "Don't worry, sister. I'm so well prepared. I'm sure I can pass this wizard's assessment," she said. "I hope so," Osticus sighed as she looked in the mirror. "I don't know if His Majesty Delphinia will use this opportunity to deliberately make things difficult for me." Upon hearing these words, Helen's hand stiffened slightly and she said, Didn't she say she allowed you to teach at the college?" "This assessment is both your wizard assessment and my teaching assessment," said Osticus, shaking her head. "If the students do not perform well enough in this assessment, then Osiris must end her career as a professor, marry a foreigner according to her father and stepmother's arrangement, and become a political sacrifice. Maybe it's orcs, maybe it's dragons. It's all the same. Normally, as long as the assessor performs fairly well, I can get a qualified teaching grade, but this year my teaching grade must be excellent, so 2 of my students must score 80 or above, or one of them must beat the person in the mirror, to get a full score," said Osticus with a somewhat sorrowful expression. This made Helen also feel a bit sad. She didn't know what to say. "Helen, there are too few people participating in the assessment this time." Osticus frowned and asked, "Scholars who have been studying for over 6 years, who else can be promoted to a bachelor's degree? Can we invite them?" "As long as they perform well, we only have 12 people now, which is too few." "Sister, there aren't 12 people left, many have taken leave," Helen whispered. "Has someone taken leave again?" Osticus pursed her lips and said, "How many people are left now?" "Including me, 3 and 3 are not 4, don't pull me," Helen shook her shoulder. "Who are you talking to?" Osticus said strangely. "Louis, His Highness Osticus. My name is Louis. Miss Helen is talking to me. She has forgotten about me, and this time we will have a 4-person assessment." Suddenly, Helen and Osticus turned their heads and vaguely saw someone, but that person was blurry. "Louis." Osticus frowned in confusion. Louis suddenly lifted his head. He had already said a lot and done a lot in the room. He is now making his final attempt. Wearing Shanghai Luan's school uniform, covering his modern clothes, and playing the role of a student. This time, when he was filming Helen, he finally had a reaction. "Yes, Louis. I am Louis, a human male. Helen's good friend, the student who is always forgotten by teacher Osticus." Louis said loudly as he watched the narrator, and with his words, a person named Louis was gradually being described in the storybook. At this point, he made a bold attempt. I have been studying at the Holy Oak for over 6 years. I am proficient in all the spells and languages in the world, and have the ability to learn any spell at a glance. I am a powerful and young wizard. In that moment, numerous narrators filled the gaps in the previous book, gradually portraying the character Lewis. Suddenly, some memories flashed through the minds of Helen and her companions in the room. Lewis suddenly had a lot of knowledge in his mind. Title obtained. Prohibition of Grand Bachelor. At this moment, Helen and Osticus trembled all over, turned their heads in surprise, and looked at the non-existent apprentice. This person, who was originally unable to distinguish between men and women, and even their faces, suddenly turned into a handsome, tall man in his early 20s in their eyes. However, the hair color and facial features do not resemble those of Sorrento. And she's also wearing Helen's wizard uniform, by the way. His name is Lewis. He is a bookworm who likes to brag and also likes to enter other people's rooms and wear their clothes. Helen looked at Lewis in front of her with a strange expression, then at her cousin who was dressing up. She blushed and stuck out her tongue, saying, "Sorry, sister. I forgot to close the door when I came in," and he sneaked in again. Lewis had a bewildered expression on his face. Osiris was stunned on the spot. She looked at herself in the mirror and picked up her clothes to cover her upper body. She angrily said, "Lewis. You're so impolite. How could you enter a lady's room while she's dressing up?" End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Banning Grand Academicians. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2, Banning Grand Academicians. Success. At this moment, both ladies were a bit furious, but Lewis was extremely excited. The excitement and smile on his face almost knocked out Helen and Osticus. Osticus trembled as she pointed towards the door and said, "Get out." Lewis, enduring his excitement, bowed and left the bedroom. Outside the bedroom was a small living room. He sat on a chair and casually picked up a small mirror from the table. My appearance has hardly changed, with black hair and brown eyes, only becoming younger. But Lewis felt as if he had gone through a lot of vicissitudes, as if at the moment he became a forbidden bachelor, the world had suddenly passed for thousands of years. Lewis flipped through the storybook floating in front of him and found that there was actually a separate page with a very special description. He squinted his eyes and realized that it was a system evaluation of his personal situation. Lewis, title. Prohibition Grand Bachelor, Existence. 0.2 Level. LV1, 0/100, Power. 0.9 Dexterity. 1.3 Magic. 3.1 Vitality. 9/9 Mana Value. 31/31 Linguistics. All languages, charm studies. You haven't learned magic spells yet, magic theory knowledge. Very solid. What does a sense of existence mean? Lewis shook his head. The present still needs to be understood. However, for now, this value seems a bit low. As for the level and attributes, they should all be the upgrade system provided by the system. From the previous narration, it can be seen that I have a chance to obtain things like random attributes +1 in the future. But from the memories given to him by the storybook, there is no such thing as a forbidden bachelor in this world. The wizarding system of this world is somewhat similar to Harry Potter. The magic of a wizard is innate and difficult to change in the future. The strength of a wizard mainly depends on whether the magic spell in his hand is powerful. But it seems like he can upgrade, so he can only attribute it to his custom identity. The narrator said, the world is beginning to develop in an unpredictable direction. And the identity is up to him to choose. Lewis chose custom and created his identity in the story. He seems to have succeeded. At the moment he was speaking about his situation, he had some extra memories. I feel like I grew up studying and growing up in a place called the Forbidden Sanctuary, and later studied abroad at St. Oak College for 6 years. But these memories are all incredibly vague, and the only clear thing in the brain is knowledge. Lewis suspected that this forbidden sanctuary was his academic career in his hometown. The storybook, based on these learning experiences and knowledge levels, instilled him with a lot of magical knowledge. Lewis did not know what level of knowledge his knowledge was, but judging from the situation in this world, it seems that they have not yet reached the level of popularizing the knowledge of gravity in magic. That is to say, many wizards here would not be as good as a junior high school student if they were placed in a forbidden sanctuary. And he is a doctor. Lewis continued to look down. From the personal style setting of Lewis in the book, it can be seen that his relationship with the students in St. Oak is very poor. The reason is that he always despises his classmates very much. In Lewis's eyes, those classmates are all kindergarten and elementary school students. But in everyone's eyes, Lewis has only been able to speak up for the past 6 years. He always claims to be proficient in all languages and magic, but has not released a single spell. This has attracted a lot of jokes and ridicule, as well as a lot of rejection. The only one who has a good relationship with him is Helen. This should be a bit of a side effect brought about by the customization of the strongest wizard. But Lewis felt like he wasn't as bad as everyone said. He does not know any magic spells, but it is only because he has never learned them in the setting. He had a feeling that his knowledge of magic was very solid, and although he had not mastered these spells, he was only missing a piece of window paper. There are many books and a nice backpack on the table. Lewis picked up a book casually and flipped through it. The text could be understood. He could also understand the incantation inside, although it was not as proficient as he had previously told Helen, it was just familiar. But he has a feeling of reviewing. At this moment, while reading a spell, Lewis suddenly had a realization. Your years of accumulated knowledge have finally had an effect, and you have comprehended the quickly accumulate full curse LV1-0/10. At this point, Lewis discovered that his character card in the storybook had an additional quickly accumulate a full spell in its spell learning. Lewis frowned and picked up a cute-looking cup from the table, took a big sip, then picked up a wand next to the book, waved it towards the half-full cup, and recited a spell from the book. Immediately after, Lewis felt that he had expended some mana, and the half-cup of water in the cup gradually began to rise. After a moment, the water was full. Your understanding of the quick and full curse LV1-10 has deepened. Sure enough. The accumulation of knowledge. I have a feeling that although I have never seen these curses in these 6 years, but I have already mastered all the necessary conditions for understanding the curse. Mastering them at this point is as simple as doing elementary school students' addition and subtraction problems. Thank you for the gift of knowledge. I think this thing is much more useful than adding a few attribute points. Lewis closed his eyes and pondered for a moment before flipping through the book in front of him. He discovered many spells that he could easily understand at a glance, and by practicing them a few times to become familiar with them, he could play them in various ways. The spell that the students at St. Oak College have been studying for a long time is like addition and subtraction in his eyes, and can be made at a glance. This is the effect of accumulation and thin hair. Lewis poured out the water from the cup and practiced it more than 10 times before realizing that there was no need to recite the spell loudly. With his understanding of knowledge and theory, as long as magic is used to adjust the structure of elements correctly, magic naturally forms. But at St. Oak College, those who can cast spells without a curse or even a staff are the great wizards. Lewis made a finger sound and the water cup slowly filled up. He poured out the water and pointed with his wand, and this time the water in the cup was instantly filled. It seems that when there is a wand, casting spells will be more powerful. Lewis glanced at the storybook and found that by this time, the full curse had turned into LV2-3/100. 10 training sessions have reached the level of silent spell casting without a cane, and 100 training sessions are equivalent to LV3. LV3 should be the level where magic takes shape with just one thought. Judging from the situation in this world, Oxycris's ability to cast the fast and fast full curse is only around the level of LV3. And when she cast these little spells, she didn't just have a thought, she had many small habits, such as curling her lips. Lewis had a feeling that if he had a deeper understanding of magic, like this kind of fast and fast accumulation, he only needed to familiarize himself with it more than 10 times to reach LV4 level. The level of LV4 is estimated to be able to fill a large water tank, and further up, it should be able to block rivers and summon wind and rain. Lewis flipped through the book again for a while and found that it seemed to be Helen's magical letter. From some notes, it can be seen that she has extremely high talent, and she can easily master many magic skills. The more difficult ones can be learned in a few weeks. But as she grew up in the academy, she has practiced these spells thousands of times, but still cannot cast without a staff, let alone without a spell. In everyone's eyes, it seems that casting without a staff or a spell is something that only super witches like Osticus, who are naturally skilled in magic, can do. Lewis suddenly lifted his head. That Prince Lachezy and the old fairy may be the ceiling of the initial characters. He didn't choose the Green Hat Prince, nor did he choose any old fairies. But now the character template he customized himself is still the ceiling. Because he added all the extra points to the most precious thing of the apprentice. Potential. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Is indeed open to multiple choices. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 is indeed open to multiple choices. After understanding his situation, Lewis looked around and found 3 rooms around the living room. One is Oshiclesa's, one seems to be Helen's, and the other is the restroom. Lewis suddenly had a strange expression on his face. He looked at the things on the table and found that the books, cups, bags, and wands belonged to Helen. He quickly wiped Helen's cup with his clothes, but found that his clothes were also Helen's school uniform. Lewis rubbed his face and felt a bit embarrassed. At this moment, he suddenly realized that there seemed to be a small room next to the bathroom. The door of this room looks a bit strange, it looks hazy as if it doesn't exist. Lewis suspected that this room should have belonged to Grandma Styria. When Lewis arrived at the door of this room, he found that the door became clear, and the small sign on the door also showed the words Lewis. After opening the door, Lewis discovered that it was a simple bedroom, about 15 square meters, and the contents inside were also very simple. There are items such as his wizard apprentice uniform, wand, etc. on the bed. In addition, there is a commonly used stretch bag by wizards. This bag looks small, but the actual space is similar to a suitcase. Lewis quickly changed into his clothes, then folded up the shirt and pants from his school uniform that did not belong to this era, and threw them into an extended bag. After finishing, he circled around the room, showing a puzzled expression. He could be certain that this should be his own room, and this room should have been prepared by the storybook for Mother Styria. But I'm not Mother Styria, why was I set up to live with Osticus? With doubts in mind, Lewis searched through fantasy travel stories, and wanted to take a look at his own background settings. But I found that there are still many gaps regarding my own background. It seems that Sister Styria's incident has become a bug, and I myself am also a bug. The presence is only 0.2, does it mean that I will disappear at any time? Shaking his head, Lewis put down his book and reflected on the current situation. He has passed the first level of entering the world. But now he seems to be a trap. According to the story, today Osticus may have to leave after this assessment and get lost. If the protagonist of the storybook changes dungeons, then her dragon-set students may have to be eliminated. So, my role may only be for one day. It seems that Lewis realized a problem. He must now follow the protagonist and increase the number of outbound shots, otherwise this dragon trap will be forgotten by the world. Perhaps he should have chosen the identity of Mother Styria and followed Osiris to Dragon's Nest City. Lewis automatically overlooked the last sentence. He will never practice the Sunflower Classic. There are 2 things to solve now. One is to find a way to improve my background in the book. The blank spaces may be one of the reasons why my presence is particularly low. Secondly, we need to find a way to help Osiris get through today's difficulties and keep her at the college. With my current presence, I may not be able to stay too far from her, but it's a bit unreasonable for someone who hasn't released a spell in 6 years to suddenly pass the wizard assessment. Lewis felt a headache, and this second level seemed a bit difficult. A sound came from outside the door, and Lewis quickly walked out of the room to the living room. He found that Miss Helen had already come out and was packing her things there. When he picked up the cup, he gave Lewis a strange look on his face. "Helen, I just practiced quickly fill the spell with that cup." Lewis's face was a bit awkward as he explained, "You know, the exam is coming soon." I know, Helen laughed as she threw the cup into the trash can. "I believe you." Helen's favorability rating .2, by the way, Lewis, Helen smiled brightly. "Could you please return my school uniform to me?" Lewis patted his forehead and quickly took out Helen's school uniform from the bag, returning it to Helen. Later, Helen also threw the uniform into the trash can. Helen's favorability rating .3, not at all, right? Lewis rubbed his face. Some are speechless. However, he became curious about the memories of Helen and Osiris. At this moment, Osticus also came out. Although she politely nodded to Lewis, he could see that her face didn't look very good. "Let's go, Lewis." After speaking, Osticus went downstairs. "It seems that your identity has been recognized by the world, but everyone's impression of this gentleman seems to be average. Perhaps Lewis is not the first to sneak into someone's room and do those strange things. How to slander others' innocence without reason." Lewis had a bewildered expression on his face. "That's right, he always says this. How can we say, secretly, about the affairs of a scholar?" Lewis rubbed his face fiercely, knowing that this should be some side effect of self-setting. "Anyway, my identity as a traveler should have been concealed." On the way, Osiris said something to Lewis, first of all, that Lewis needs to change some of his habits and not call her His Highness in the academy. "You can call me Mississippi. What do you usually call a mentor over there?" Lewis was slightly taken aback and remembered his identity as an exchange student. Boss. "Oh, yes." Osticus shook her head with a strange expression. "The wizards of the Forbidden Sanctuary always like to be independent." Lewis's face suddenly turned strange, and he noticed that his background setting had suddenly added something. There have been more descriptions about the prohibition of sanctuaries. Osiris continued, stating that although she was not a few years older than Lewis, since she had become Lewis's mentor, she had the responsibility of a guardian. Lewis should also treat himself as an elder and not do strange things. She said a lot in an elder's tone with a serious and caring tone. But Lewis not only had no embarrassment or depression on his face, but also showed a surprised expression, as he noticed that as he spoke with Osiris, the description of Lewis in the storybook gradually improved. Seemingly seeing Lewis's expression of joy, Osticus suddenly stopped and trembled all over. Finally, unable to suppress her anger, she angrily rebuked. "Lewis, the most important thing for a wizard is character. You've been going too far lately. If next time I find you secretly hiding under my bed, then you'll come from where you're coming from and go back." Helen also glanced at Lewis with that kind of gaze. The two ladies seemed to have remembered more things, but they also felt something was wrong. Suddenly, Lewis noticed that the storybook had added a few more pages before the first page of the book. The current storybook began with his sudden appearance in the room, and the few extra pages are what happened when Lewis entered the bedroom. At present, these few pages are blank, writing along with the memories, or fantasies, of Osiris and Helen. Lewis suddenly realized a problem. The storybook was fixing the bug between Mother Styria and Lewis. He decided to take a gamble and suddenly exclaimed, "Miss Osticus, I think you may have forgotten something. Do you remember what you said to me when I entered the bed?" Osticus felt a jolt in her mind, and Helen also rubbed her head. Both of them have different memories. One remembers Lewis staying under the bed, while the other remembers that Lewis and she entered the room together. The surrounding scene suddenly became illusory. The book once again appeared in front of Lewis, with pages constantly flipping and many words filling in the plot about what happened in the bedroom before the appearance of Lewis. Your Highness, it was you who asked me to clean the room. After I cleaned it, I said, Your Highness, I have finished cleaning under the bed. Do you remember anything else? Later, you asked me to go find Helen, and I entered the room with her. With Lewis's words, he saw the newly appeared pages in the storybook, gradually adding a lot of text. And in the surrounding time and space, things like strings suddenly appeared, constantly breaking and reassembling. Chapter 4. Self-cultivation of a dragon set. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Self-cultivation of a dragon set. Because there was a delay in the morning, Osticus became a bit anxious. She quietly violated some small rules of the college and grabbed Lewis and Helen's shoulders halfway, performing a phantom shape-shifting. The surrounding space suddenly stretched and twisted at this moment, and when the environment slowly recovered, Lewis found himself in a small bathroom. The shuttle just now made Lewis feel slightly dizzy and nauseous, and Helen's face also turned a bit pale. She couldn't help but stroke her chest and let out a dry vomit. That's when I finally came over. Lewis's strength has just been increased by 1 point, now it is 1.9. It seems that if his physique and magic are relatively high, he will have a better tolerance for magic. When Lewis regained his senses, he noticed that Osiris was secretly scrutinizing his face with a strange gaze. Cough, you're doing well, Osticus said with an unnatural expression, and then she opened the door to the outside room. This is a big house, and it looks big and beautiful inside. There are many sofas, bookcases, paintings, and fireplaces in the house. There are also many silver tools that can move and speak. There are dozens of students of all ages, busy with some tasks in the lounge. It looks like preparing seats and magic props. In a corner of the big house, there are also several adult wizards drinking tea and chatting. After they saw Osticulus come out of the bathroom, an elderly wizard gave Osticulus a slightly reproachful look, and then greeted her with a smile from the surrounding professors. This wizard seems to be the vice dean of the branch, who has been in the court before and can be considered half of Osticus's teacher. Osiris brought Lewis and Helen out and stood in the big room chatting with the professors. It seems that Osiris is still very popular in the college, and many professors at St. Oak College seem to be supporters of this princess political faction. However, as Osticus said, there seems to be no one calling her His Highness here, nor does anyone pay too much attention to the court's traditional etiquette. Many older wizards even treat Osticus as a proud student. Our assessment is here, Helen whispered to Lewis, look at those exam props. It's done, there's a mirror. It must be the defense against the dark arts assessment. Compared to the defense against the dark arts assessment, Lewis was more concerned about another question. Helen, how many people are taking the exam this time? Why are there so many people here? It seems that there are still many people walking in at the door, as if there are a lot of people coming this time. Indeed, it's just the 4 of us. Helen pursed her lips and looked at the gradually seated people with a somewhat complicated expression, saying, those people are all here to listen. Today I heard that palace wizards, nobles, and officials from the Ministry of Magic will also come. It's better to say they're here to listen than to watch jokes. Most of those people are from the Witch Queen faction. In order to win the favor of the Witch Queen, these people are likely to have become ghosts in today's assessment. The Witch Queen does not want the princess to continue staying in the academy. If today's level can be passed, Sister Osticus can prove herself to her father and the Magical Council, and continue to stay in the safe ivory tower of the academy. But if something goes wrong, then Osiris will have to leave the academy and follow the arrangements of her father, the king, and the witch. At that time, the power of the princess will also scatter the fallen macaques, because the Witch Queen will not leave her supporters in the academy. Thinking of this, Helen felt a bit sad. She couldn't help but search in the room. Before long, her gaze fell on the two young men on the sofa next to the fireplace, and she felt a slight sense of security in her heart. She quickly grabbed Lewis's hand and walked over. At this Royal Academy of Witchcraft and Wizardry, most of the apprentices come from prestigious families. You can tell a thing or two from the behavior of those apprentices. And next to the sofa by the fireplace, there was a pair of very prominent young nobles sitting there resting. They look around 17 or 18 years old. The other apprentices seemed to be very afraid of them, and occasionally someone was beckoned over by them. Those apprentices who were called over would also respectfully salute the nobility and carefully listen to the words of the two nobles in a low voice. It seems that both of these people have extraordinary identities. And Lewis noticed that there were still 2 empty seats next to the sofa. But no one dared to sit there. Seeing Helen pulling herself towards this sofa, Lewis knew that these 2 empty seats should be Helen and him. But he didn't know those 2 noble youths. Lewis's face was a bit strange, and apart from knowledge, his other memories were very blurry now. These 2 people had a slight influence on him, but he didn't remember many things. Speak less, so as not to show your horse's feet. Terrace, Luffy. Helen happily leaned over, as if she had seen 2 saviors. Terrace and the others turned around, and when they saw Helen, their faces showed sunny smiles. But when he saw Lewis being pulled by Helen, a hint of disgust appeared in his eyes. They ignored Lewis directly and started chatting with Helen. Lewis was delighted to see these 2 people looking at him with disgusted eyes. It seems that there is an impression between us. Although it is very poor. But this indicates that my sense of presence is still acceptable. After thinking for a moment, Lewis didn't brush his presence on the 2 of them. Just 2 sets, what's good to brush? He decided to read a book. Sitting on the sofa, Lewis casually picked up a book that Helen had placed on the table and flipped through it. After a few glances, I found that those spells seemed to have become even simpler. He glanced at his personal description and found that he was no longer very solid in knowledge, but rather highly accomplished. Lewis also had many interpretations of various strange creatures in his mind. This should be the knowledge of fairies. After recalling the knowledge he had already mastered, Lewis continued to flip through the complete collection of daily basic curses in front of him. At this moment, when he went to read the spells in the book again, he could actually see at a glance what were the imperfections of these spells. This seems to indicate that with his current level of knowledge, he is already stronger than the person who wrote this book. The knowledge of fairies is truly remarkable. After reading his own description again, Lewis noticed that there were also some changes on his side of the curse. Originally, it was LV2, 3/100, and now it has been changed to LV2, 3/1. He flipped through the complete collection of daily basic spells and found several new ones. Among them, there were several spells that were particularly simple, such as Kwai 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 Kwai, which he memorized directly. After chewing them repeatedly, he felt like he could easily use them. He glanced at his own curse studies, and indeed, there were a few more spells coming out. And they are all LV1, 0/0. Lewis flipped through the book to the end and found a daily curse with a long spell that could make brooms, rags, and so on move and clean the room on their own. This spell can be considered the most difficult spell in this book. The text alone has 5 or 6 lines. But Lewis felt that it was not much different from fast and fast charging. Seeing that the 3 people around him were not paying attention to him, Lewis muttered the curse in a low voice. However, he omitted all the parts that could be omitted in the middle. In the end, the mantra of the 5 or 6 elements was recited by him in just a few sentences. Immediately afterwards, Lewis discovered that he had added an additional, cleaning curse LV3, January 10th, in his personal profile in the book. Is it directly from LV3? And did I unleash it? Lewis couldn't help but look up and found Luffy on the opposite sofa, staring blankly at his golden handkerchief. Just now, this gentleman was wiping his hands while sarcastically arguing with Terrace. But then he realized that the handkerchief in his hand suddenly broke free from him like a little person, bowed to him, and began dancing happily on the table, wiping it like a mirror. Who is it? Luffy's eyes showed a hint of anger. These lower-grade students were so shameless that they dared to play tricks on themselves. He looked up and searched for who was playing a prank with a wand. The nearby students quickly lowered their heads when they saw Luffield getting angry. Some people holding wands were also frightened and quickly threw them aside. Luffield searched for a long time but couldn't find the intentional person. He felt that the magical wave just now was nearby. But only Helen was covering her mouth and giggling around. Luffy suddenly smiled and his face was filled with a smile. Helen, you are so mischievous. It seems that you have been doing well in your studies lately, and you can even cast spells without a staff. Teresa's face was also somewhat surprised. In this room, apart from the professors, there were only 3 people sitting here who could make the handkerchief dance. And in silence, it can make the handkerchief dance and even wipe the table like a mirror. Perhaps only super witches with witch king bloodline like Helen and Osticus can do it. Obviously, Helen has been a bit obsessed with this curse lately, so she showed everyone a hand. It is indeed very surprising. Helen covered her mouth and smiled for a while without explaining. Just quietly glanced at Lewis, who was pretending to read in formal attire. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. 2 male protagonists. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. 2 male protagonists. When I see Helen chatting with 2 people, I always look at myself. Lewis's mouth twitched as if he hadn't seen it. But Lewis discovered something strange. Originally, the 2 of Luffield seemed to completely treat him as non-existent. But now they occasionally glance at him. Lewis looked at the storybook in confusion and found that his sense of existence seemed to have just increased a little. His eyebrows couldn't help but rise. Cough, Helen, lend me your magic letter. Lewis suddenly put down the book in his hand and said to Helen with a big grin, I don't know what to assess today. I don't even know a magic spell. Sure enough, after saying these words, Luffy and Terrace exchanged a glance and almost burst into laughter. You said you don't know anything, just stay honest and confidently say you don't even know a magic spell. Brush, what kind of presence? Seeing that this guy was still pretending to be coerced, Helen glared at Lewis with anger, flipped out her magic notebook, patted off Lewis's outstretched hand, and said, then you should take the exam well, and I'll have to rely on you in the future. To be honest, although this was polite, Helen really had some expectations now. She felt that Lewis might have been preparing for this assessment for a long time. It's just some dark magic defense spells. Lewis took Helen's book and flipped it around, looking like an ignorant bookworm. Helen's eyes were originally a bit expectant, but after hearing these words, the corners of her mouth couldn't help but twitch. Is it just a dark magic defense spell? Does he know what this is? This is high-level magic. Osiris dared not say such words. On the other side, Luffy and Terrace looked at each other with strange expressions after listening, and then Terrace covered his stomach and laughed so hard that he couldn't speak. This Louis VI is truly a masterpiece. I haven't released any magic spells in 6 years, but today the wizard was assessed and not only planned to learn magic spells now, but also vigorously boasted. And Helen was very polite, he took it seriously. Luffield also felt a little amused. He put down his nail clipper, crossed his legs, looked up and down at the bookworm across from him, and said, illiteracy. Our Louis VI Grand Secretary, you don't really plan to learn and sell as you go today, do you? The titles Louis VI and the Great Scholar are both nicknames given to Louis by everyone, carrying a deep derogatory connotation. In everyone's impression, Louis has a bookish arrogance. I often like to point fingers at others in magic like a bachelor's degree. A bachelor's degree. Does he know what a bachelor's degree is? But in the past 6 years, even a curse was useless to him. This has led to many jokes, just like Kong Iji. Learn and sell now. No, no, no. Lewis flipped through the book, not looking up, and said in his usual tone, "It's impromptu speech, impromptu speech. There is no Chinese idiom in this world, and impromptu speeches are like sharpening a gun at the moment." The allusion of the idiom comes from a king, who said that for those who are prepared, even if they perform on the spot, they will still frighten the world. As soon as these words were spoken, Terrace laughed even harder, and even the corners of Luffy's usually stern face couldn't help but twitch. This foreign exchange student is really a top-notch. He always makes all kinds of jokes and harasses Royal Highness Princess all day long. A toad really wants to eat swan meat. Let him make a fool of himself today and get out of the college as soon as possible. Terrace and the others were laughing wildly over there, and Helen also stroked her forehead, unsure of what to say. Quickly shift the topic away. But no matter how much she tried to shift the topic, the focus of Luffy and his wife always returned to Lewis. Gradually, in the conversation between the three, Lewis began to emerge. It seems that as long as Lewis is around, Luffy and Terrace, who have a bad relationship, can always find common topics and laughter. Looking at his presence plus 0.1 and presence plus 0.2, Lewis couldn't help but dance with joy. This looks like a bookworm seeing something happy while reading. This made Terrace and Luffy laugh even harder. Even Helen couldn't help but cover her mouth and secretly laugh as she looked at Lewis in a daze. At this point, Lewis realized that it seemed that the interaction had reached a certain level, and the description of the two of them appeared in the storybook. After reading the descriptions of these two people, Lewis suddenly remembered the two male protagonists mentioned at the beginning of the storybook. And it's still the kind of black and white prince, domineering CEO's dog blood setting. It's Luffy and Terrace. Luffield is the son of the Grand Prince of the Byron Kingdom, not only holding a ducal title, but also having inheritance rights to the kingdom along with his own father. And Terrace is the son of the Grand Duke of a certain duchy, and his status is not lower than that of Luffy. They are all people sent by the family to represent the family in supporting Osiris. Meanwhile, advocates from both families do not marry off princesses. The reason is that I naturally hope the princess can marry her own family. Or rather, I hope the princess can choose one of these two people in the future and become her husband. So in the hearts of both Terrace and Luffy, they did not consider Osiris as a true teacher. According to the story's setting of dog hematuria, one of them will indeed become Osticus's husband. This foreigner's name is really hard to remember. It's impossible to distinguish the four words Luffield just by listening. Lewis touched his chin and saw that his sense of presence was now 3.67, while Terrace was 309 and Luffield was 393. Oh, it seems that these are two male protagonists. Not my colleague in the dragon suit. A bit sad. With curiosity, Lewis looked at his own favorability in the hearts of Helen and the others. He found that Helen's favorability was actually 79%. This greatly puzzled Lewis, as he should have left a very bad impression on her at the beginning of the game. This indicates that Helen seems to have a high initial preference for herself. This made Lewis curious. As for Terrace and Luffy's favorability towards themselves, it's 20.3%. Not so much, right? In confusion, Lewis observed these two people attentively. I noticed that their gaze towards me seemed to have changed slightly from before. At first, the two of them looked as if they were looking at an optional dragon trap. Now, although they also seemed to be looking at the trap, there was a hint of mockery, disdain, and even a hint of vigilance in their eyes. This is not like looking at a classmate with an unpleasant personality. Instead, it feels like watching a clown. Lewis became very strange in his heart. Is it difficult? Do I still have the responsibility of being slapped in the face by the protagonist as a dragon trap? But what is my background? What kind of identity positioning do these two protagonists have in their eyes? Lewis became curious again. From the current situation, the three students of Osiris have extraordinary talents and backgrounds. Helen goes without saying that Terrace and Luffield are the male protagonists of the Black and White Horse. One of them will marry Osticus, while the other will marry Helen after the marriage dispute fails. So in the story, Osiris's students are all very special. So who are you? A person who originated from the fantasy of Osiris and was gradually transformed into reality by the Book of Fate. What? End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Where is a dragon suit qualified to not be a leading bird? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Where is a dragon suit qualified to not be a leading bird? A fantasy originating from Osiris and gradually becoming a real person. What? Just as Lewis was puzzled, Helen suddenly stretched out her upper body and flipped through the magic letter in Lewis's hand. Her hair accidentally fell on Lewis's face, but she didn't notice anything. After teasing her own hair, she continued to flip it. It's like interacting with Lewis is a normal thing. Seeing Helen's gesture, Lewis fell into contemplation. Isn't the fantasy travel story the Book of Fate described in the story? Osiris summoned me over, so Helen subconsciously thought she was my sister. Law, and when Luffy and his wife were looking at me, it was like they were looking at a toad dragon trap that wanted to eat a swan. Recalling the dog blood fantasies recorded in the book, Lewis felt a chill. He has no interest in these vulgar stories, nor in any so-called princesses. He only thought about the second level in front of him now. It's useless for you to read these contents, Lewis. Helen flipped through Lewis's magical notebook to a certain page and looked at Lewis with some reproach. Don't look at those extracurricular things, copy them over quickly. I also need to take a look at them right away. Impromptu speeches, right. After speaking, Helen took a feather pen and a small notebook and stuffed them into Lewis's hand. Then he glanced at Lewis in silence. That looks like saying, why don't you bring anything? Then he sat back in his seat. Lewis let out a deep sigh, picked up his pen, and lowered his head to look at the magical notebook. In the page Helen flipped over, there were many diagrams about terrifying monsters such as evil spirits and soul wrappers. He was extremely familiar with them, and in the knowledge of fairies, there were all kinds of fairies that were very comprehensive. So now he can even see at a glance where is wrong in these charts. However, it can be confirmed that although there are many errors in the manual and description of monsters, both of the two spells written in Helen's letter can handle them. These two curses, one named Retreat Magic Curse and the other named Evil Spirit Retreat Scattering Curse. From Helen's annotations and research notes, it can be seen that these two spells are very difficult. Because Helen believes they are incomplete. And every wizard must add something according to their own understanding when using these two spells. When Lewis studied these two spells, he thought it was just an elementary school algebra application problem. Those few things can be obtained by algebra with an X. You have comprehended the Retreat Magic Curse LV1-0/7, and the Evil Spirit Retreat Scattering Curse LV1-0/6, well, these elementary school algebra application problems still need to be done a few times. Lewis continued to look down and found a strange little note. The note on it was very new, and even with a hard wipe, it would stick ink. It looked like it was just written this morning. It seems that this is a cheat note prepared by Oshicles for Helen. There is her understanding of this kind of curse on it. But this teacher's level is obviously not very good. She wrote a simple thing with numerous loopholes and complexity. There is also a comment from Osiris above. This curse is obscure and difficult to understand, but it is very likely that it was the ultimate goal set by them in this assessment. You secretly memorize them. I haven't used these curses in front of anyone else, so just say they were newly developed by you. Lewis shook his head as he looked at the messy things written by Osiris. Don't think about it, Helen is on hold. Using this spell to cast a spell, one may be able to unleash it 100%. According to Helen's understanding of magic, the success rate may not exceed 20%. He felt that Osiris's original intention may not be to let Helen defeat the mirror demon, but to use this stunning curse to allow Helen to show some grace and gain some points even if she fails. But there are two types of people in the mirror that cannot showcase their charm in front of them. The nameless and evil spirits. To deal with these two things, either you win completely or you get kicked out by the evil spirits. As long as you lose, there will never be any good ratings. Maybe you will dance upside down on the spot. Why don't you just read without copying? Can you remember? Helen looked over again, with a hint of resentment in her tone. Lewis let out a deep sigh and took out his empty white magic spell notebook from his bag, copying it. After a moment, he calmly returned the letter to Helen. Have you all copied it? Helen flipped through the book and said, remember it well, but don't let the examiner see you reciting a small note. Although you may not be able to release it, as long as you can make the examiner feel the magic inside, there will still be points. But let's talk about it first. You use the evil spirit retreat curse, I use the retreat curse, and we will each have one. Oh. Lewis was a little curious. Don't you need the evil spirit retreat spell above to score? Helen smiled confidently and said, the evil spirit retreat and scatter curse is specifically designed to deal with soul summoners. If it appears, I can handle it directly. The meaning behind the words is that if you encounter a soul charmer, there will be no Lewis involved. I hope so. Lewis said to himself. Not long after, many officials from the Ministry of Magic, palace wizards, more professors and apprentices also entered one after another. It seems that there are quite a few people coming to listen today. Luffield and Terrace also felt that the atmosphere was a bit off. There were too many people. They couldn't help but raise their chests and speak with a gentle and elegant demeanor, exuding the demeanor of a noble family. Lewis noticed that apart from some academic wizards, almost no one greeted Osiris. Instead, everyone instinctively glanced at Luffy and Terrace. Those gazes are either hopeful or more interested, but more meaningful and warning. It seems that Osiris's current situation is not very good. It can be said that she is not on all sides, but also in a state of decline. Among those who support her, the old professors of the academic school have no interest in politics. Other people also have deep intentions. Obviously, the kingdom of Tyrenda is now the final say's final word. There won't be any good fruit to eat for Osticulus as a leading bird today. Lewis has no power or influence, and he does not intend to become a leading actor or seize the role of the male lead. No matter who, as long as there is one person who can pass today, they can try their best to install dumbbells today and continue to install them. But what she didn't expect was that before everyone came to the mirror, Osticulus would let herself be the first to appear. Who qualifies Long Tao to rank at the bottom? Long Tao should be ranked at the front as cannon fodder for the protagonists to explore. End of this chapter. Learn Chapter 7 well. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Learn Chapter 7 well. Looking at himself in the mirror with a strange smile on his face, Lewis's expression was somewhat brilliant. In the mirror, he was laughing eerily, while Osticus and Helen were behind him, hand in hand, doing a handstand ballet. Osiris has been staring at Lewis from behind for half a day, and Lewis has to take one move and make a big splash. As you might imagine, a demon sealed in a mirror is like a castrated kitten, and solving it is simply too easy. Rewards. 1 interest from the Ministry of Magic, 1 interest from the strange wizard Sakura Rin, 1 quota for participation in cross-species reproduction experiments, 1 sexy female orc, and 30 days of super physical recovery potion B. On the spot, he went to the palace and startled the evil spirits in the mirror and Osiris's chin, thus dispelling the evil spirits. Afterwards, he went to the Sorrento Magic Kingdom to create a martial arts school in another world, reaching the pinnacle. Rewards. Sunflower Encyclopedia, *1, Introduction Letter from His Highness Osiris *1, Palace Work Permit *1, Teacher, I don't know. Rewards. Magic +1, Holy Oak Dropout Notice *1. Osiris' face had become increasingly ugly. The discussions and laughter among the listeners in the seats in the hall became more and more prominent. Although due to the angle, the people below cannot see clearly in the mirror. But while standing on the stage, Osticus could observe the scene in the mirror with Lewis. The high aristocratic stockings, the witch's close-fitting dress that fell to her waist with a slit, and the inverted dance, making Osticus wish to smash the mirror on the spot and then blind Lewis, the only witness on the scene. Lewis rubbed his face fiercely, thought about his character design in consistent style, and began to ponder. After a moment, he lifted his head and confidently said to Osticus, "Teacher, I don't know how to. But please give me some more time, it's just a withdrawal spell. I'll prepare well and there's absolutely no problem." Osticus pursed her lips, knowing that Lewis was bragging nonsense. Lewis was a person with high eyes and low hands, that's all. But now, that's all we can do. We can't just let him step down and lower his teaching score. Go, stand behind Helen. Osticus glared fiercely at Lewis, looking like an unhappy teacher. But Lewis breathed a great sigh of relief. He saw the magic +1, but the dropout notice is temporarily unavailable. It shows going to the teaching office to collect it. Get a fart, as long as today is over, there is also a farts dropout notice. When the time comes, he will just act casually and not be dropped out of school at all. At most, he will be kept at a level, making Louis VI Louis VII. After hearing the conversation between the two on stage, the audience burst into laughter, and almost all the officials from the Ministry of Magic and Palace Wizards who came to listen today laughed their teeth out. Is it just a withdrawal curse? Does this Louis VI know what kind of curse that is? Do you know how much time everyone prepared this time to get Osiris out of the royal family and marry into the dragon race? So what's in the mirror is a demon-level evil spirit. Not to mention the clown student of Osiris, none of us present dare to say that we have the confidence to easily handle it. What made everyone even more amused was that Osticus even nodded. As the Queen said, this performance was truly wonderful. Of course, if these people led by Osiris can really handle it, the thought of this made everyone's heart slightly tremble, and they couldn't help but look at the two students who laughed the hardest. These two students are about to burst into tears with laughter. Louis VI has been boasting for 6 years, really taking what he boasted about seriously. Learn. Louis, then study hard. A tall and handsome man in his early 20s walked up to the stage from behind. Then he bowed slightly to Osticus, wanting a hand kiss. However, he was evaded without leaving a trace, so Terrace gently stroked his chest and said, "Your Highness, please rest assured. Give me 5 no's, 3 minutes, and I will definitely not disappoint you." Osticus nodded faintly and said, "Go, Sir Terence." She let out a deep sigh in her heart. What she was most worried about was that something had happened. Those people had brought a demon disaster, which was not only difficult to deal with, but also difficult to recognize. Whether Terrace and Luffield can handle it is still a matter of 5 or 5. As for Louis Osticus, she couldn't help but quietly glance at Louis, who was squatting there, flipping through a book and preparing, with a face full of disbelief. He actually knew he should use the curse of retreat. Did he recognize that it was a demon disaster? It shouldn't be. Osticus suspected that Helen had given Louis the curse of retreat. He was only prepared for this curse, so she said it. Osiris couldn't help but rub her forehead. The good news is that I got the right question ahead of time. The bad news is, looking at this picture, this guy hasn't even memorized it. Don't make a fool of yourself later. At this moment, Terrace had already come to the mirror. As he faced the person in the mirror with his eyes, his mind roared and he realized what it was. He almost hit the road at a glance. Why was Louis so calm when he just stood here? This is not an ordinary evil spirit at all. It looks ever changing, what exactly is it? Damn it. We should let that idiot from Luffy come first. Terrace glanced at Luffy in his spare light and found him bowing his head, focusing on wiping his hands with a golden handkerchief, his mouth full of mockery. At this moment, a needle could be heard falling in the hall, and a pair of eyes were fixed on Terence. Some eunuchs specially sent by the queen have already tightly grasped a corner, secretly leaving behind a cold sweat. Terrace is no exception. He knew that this kind of thing would become stronger and stronger with human fear. He quickly restrained his mind, gritted his head, and cast various spells, trying to defeat the demon sealed in the mirror. At the same time, everyone's eyes were also focused on him. Like everyone else, Lewis, who had already been ignored, was also squinting his eyes slightly as he stared at Terence. But what was staring at was not the person Terrace, but the one who carefully listened to the spell Terrace was reciting with his ears. As Terence recited his spells one by one, Lewis also recited them in a low voice. But he discovered that there were many omitted pronunciations in Terrace's curse, so he sensed the changes in his magical field with his mind. After a moment, Lewis moved his eyes slightly and found that he had found the correct spell. He then realized that he had learned the few small spells that Terrace used to test the enemy. However, these are not curses for dealing with demons and misfortunes. Lewis's face was somewhat puzzled. What is this guy up to? At this moment, Lewis felt Helen stuffing a small note into his hand and looked down to see that it was the exorcism spell that Helen was about to recite. You can use this, Helen whispered with a pale face. It'll be too ugly later. End of this chapter. Chapter 8, I'll teach you again. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8, I'll teach you again. Aren't you planning to use this? Lewis was somewhat puzzled. Helen looked at the mirror on the stage and shook her head in despair. Everyone is using it the same. Don't worry, I won't be too embarrassed. Others may not recognize the person inside the mirror, but Osticus and Helen recognized the person inside the mirror, who was Lord Stewart, the warden of the Dark Dungeon. He used to be the mirror demon of the previous Witch Queen. She is the guardian of Osiris, and Helen knows how terrifying Mr. Stewart is. Now that these 2 or 5 young men have defected, it is likely that Mr. Stewart has submitted a petition to His Majesty the Witch. Lewis took the note and didn't say much. Helen and Terrace have already lost. This kind of demon and evil spirit sealed in the mirror, no matter how strong, is as if it has been castrated. When dealing with them, as long as you close your own brain, evil spirits are like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Can be needed at will. But the key is that they are all afraid. With fear, they compete with demons and evil spirits. Even if it is a master of magic spells, even if they know how to withdraw them, they will definitely be defeated. The Ministry of Magic did indeed find an interesting evil spirit. It should be a nightmare type. Now the lamb to be slaughtered has turned into Terrace and Helen. As they face demons and evil spirits, the Mirror Man will become stronger and more invincible. And once the evil spirits devour enough negative emotions from the opponent, all the spells from the opponent are useless to it. Every spell cast on the evil spirits is equivalent to being cast on the caster. In this situation, if the demons and misfortunes cannot be solved in a short period of time, the seed in the heart will grow over time and gradually be controlled by the demons and misfortunes. So no matter how well the assessor performs, they will always make a fool of themselves in the end. As for Terrace, he performed even worse than Helen. He seemed to have not yet recognized what it was, thinking it was an ordinary person in the mirror. And this fool seemed to care too much about the audience's gaze, realizing that he hadn't defeated his opponent with a few moves, and sweat was already on his forehead. At this moment, Terrace seemed to have switched to several striking spells, as if he wanted to try breaking the mirror. After being hit in the mirror, cracks did appear on the mirror, but it quickly recovered. But at the moment when the mirror cracked, Terrace felt as if he had been severely injured. It's like those curses hit him. But the faces of the examiner and the listeners were both very nervous, as it seemed that Terrace was calm and confident. This has caused many people to secretly sweat. If there is a problem today, the witch will definitely blame it. And Terrace has been famous for a long time. This assessment did not come to the end, and no one knows the outcome. But what no one knew was that Terrace's little thumb was already trembling. He found himself unable to handle this thing. Persisting until now is entirely to fight for a little score. At this moment, a spell was misplaced again and reflected from the mirror to the audience. Almost hit someone. There was a commotion in the audience, but Terrace said calmly, "It's just a small attempt. Don't worry, everyone. I'll take care of it right away." The audience couldn't help but hold their breath and watched nervously. However, not long after, Terrace missed the filling. He began to giggle foolishly, and the spell in his hand became even more strange. In the end, he actually released a very impressive magic. He was completely enchanted. This is a curse that Terrace has obtained from a certain fox girl, and it is his ace card prepared for this assessment. But obviously, Terrace is already in the path of demons and evil spirits, otherwise he would never have used this magic in front of the mirror. The mirror man and Terrace both hit this move, and then the mirror man gave a strange smile and dispersed. Terrace also suddenly regained consciousness. He wiped the sweat off his head and breathed a big sigh of relief. Then he stood on the stage, stood up and nodded in all directions below, then gracefully walked down to touch Osticus' chest and salute, saying, "Your Highness, you don't disappoint your trust. The person in the mirror has been repelled by me. Please marry me. I won. I won." Ha 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 ha. After speaking, Terrace shouted and jumped wildly from the audience, running around wildly. You can smell needles falling in the hall. Even Osticus's mouth opened slightly. Terrace was hit. This is the magic of the fox. No one can solve this trick, we must find Miss Sakura Ling to come over. Pop 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 pop. A faint round of applause suddenly rang out. It was Luffy. The tranquility in the hall was shattered, and thousands of onlookers burst into laughter, many of whom applauded along. Amidst the applause, Terrace smiled even happier, clearly seeing it as a congratulatory gesture to himself. But by now, no one had paid attention to this infatuated and pitiful creature. At this moment, everyone's gaze was already focused on Luffy. The demon disaster and evil spirit brought this time is mainly for this Luffy. Rumors have it that Luffy once learned a very terrifying spell with a mysterious wizard. So the situation is really hard to say. Seeing that Luffy was ready to go on stage, the laughter in the hall gradually faded, and many people's eyes also showed an extremely solemn expression. Not bad. Sir Terrace. It was an impressive performance. But unfortunately, everyone couldn't learn anything from your performance. A burst of laughter erupted from the audience. Osticus pursed her lips and gave Luffy a glare, indicating that he didn't go too far. At this moment, the audience's gaze had already turned to Luffy. Luffy took out a golden handkerchief and wiped his hands, saying to Lewis, "Lewis, you may not have understood what Terrace just taught you. But it's okay." As he spoke, Luffy gave his handkerchief to Lewis and said, "I'll teach you again. Within 1 minute, the person in the mirror will play a dance piece." As soon as these words were spoken, the originally chaotic hall gradually quieted down, as if everyone believed he was not bragging. And Osiris was also slightly surprised when she heard Luffy's words. "Luffy, be careful, that's it." Cough. The examiner next to her glanced at Osticulus. Osiris turned pale and dared not speak recklessly anymore. Live prompts, like cheating, have a significant impact on teaching ratings. And this examiner was specifically sent to nitpick. Luffy didn't say much, he gave Osticus a slightly calm look, as if he knew what it was. Subsequently, he patted his sleeve and stood proudly in front of the mirror amidst the overwhelming attention. Immediately afterwards, he surprisingly did not take out his wand, but extended his hands and waved them in front of the mirror like playing with a puppet. As he recited his spell, the person in the mirror really danced. Everyone in the hall took a deep breath, and many couldn't help but stand up from their seats. Even the examiner in charge of nitpicking widened his eyes. He didn't expect Luffield to be so decisive and directly perform his ultimate skill. Today, either the demon is completely defeated, or he is completely defeated. Perhaps within a few moves. But on the other side, Lewis's face became even more peculiar. He could feel that there was something wrong with Luffy's magic field. The original appearance of this magic should be somewhat different from what he cast. He glanced at the narrator and verified his guess. Taboo. Marionette LV00/679. The caster seems to have not fully mastered this technique, and you cannot fully learn it. You need to understand it on your own. Not bad magic, one enchanted and one string puppet, both seem to have extraordinary effects. Today, I have gained something from them. But unfortunately, these spells are not used in this way. Shaking his head, Lewis took out a small note. This was the spell that Osticus used to cheat on everyone. Today he will cheat in front of everyone. Lewis tapped his fingers on the note, and then all the spells on it changed. At this moment, waves of uncontrollable laughter appeared in the crowd. Lewis turned his head to look at Luffy's side and found that the dance music of the person in the mirror had become increasingly distorted, and Luffy's body began to shake unnaturally. After just a few seconds, Luffy's body seemed to start losing control and he danced with the person in the mirror. Later on, he even started a striptease in the lobby and ran around in a frenzy, bouncing and jumping barefoot. Enough. Stuart. Osticus yelled at the mirror with a pale face, "You're so uncivilized." But the person in the mirror ignored it and played even harder. The new book has been signed and the contract has been mailed back. The first wave of benefits will arrive in the next 2 days. Everyone, hurry up and invest. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. White Phoenix. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 White Phoenix. Osiris closed her eyes and trembled all over. It was her student being played with on that platform. The laughter below was like slapping her face in public, leaving her face unrecognizable. After today's meeting, she no longer has the face to stay in the college. There is no one in this world who can save themselves. It's all my own fantasy. My destiny is to go to the Dragon Nest City and be with the dragon. It seems like it's almost there. The examiner finally spoke up. All right, Mr. Stewart. The examiner looked in the mirror, smiled, and said to Osticus, Miss Osticus should be heartbroken if Mr. Luffield embarrasses again. The person in the mirror gave a slight bow and looked at Osticulus, who had a pale face, with a smile on her face. Then he looked at Helen and Lewis with great interest, waiting for the last 2 lambs to come on stage. On the other side, Luffy had already walked off the stage in a daze amidst a burst of laughter. Terrace also laughed as he covered his stomach. Obviously the spell on this idiot had not been lifted, and he didn't know what Luffy's failure would mean. What a wonderful dance. Terrace laughed as he covered his stomach and said, Lewis, have you learned it? Go and dance with our evil spirit master. As soon as these words were spoken, Luffy's face turned ashen and he looked at Terence with a resentful gaze. And the people in the hall also recalled the scene from Luffield just now, and couldn't help but laugh even harder. Tyrus was cursed, and Osiris didn't blame him. But she couldn't help but turn a pale face. The last hope has been shattered. Helen can't handle that thing at all. She will embarrass herself in public, lose face, and lose all her future. I'm already done, I can't burden my sister anymore. She pursed her lips and looked at Lewis, with a look of despair in her eyes. Lewis. The sound of Lewis made the listeners in the hall laugh even harder. In the midst of despair, Osticus actually turned to a talkative but not practical Kong-Iji. This scene was too dramatic, but perhaps in Osiris' subconscious, it is natural for her to seek help from someone when she is desperate. Although she has not yet realized the problem. thousands of pairs of eyes have already turned to the clown on stage, jokingly known as Louis VI. As the witch Delphinia said, today's performance will be incredibly exciting. Amidst the noise in the hall, thousands of pairs of eyes focused on the clown who had been holding hands and watching coldly. Amidst the crowd's attention, Louis slowly stepped onto the stage and, amidst the laughter, solemnly caressed his chest and nodded in greeting each room below. Then, he coughed his throat gently, and in the despair of Osiris, he took out a small note from his sleeve. Then, he casually waved his wand, and in the midst of everyone's wild laughter, he recited a lengthy spell from the note to the stunned Mr. Stewart in the mirror. The laughter in the hall couldn't help but stir up another wave, even the crystal ball secretly held by a minister emitted a very pleasant female laughter. At this moment, Luffy, who was watching, breathed a sigh of relief and felt a bit uncomfortable. I breathed a sigh of relief that although everyone was embarrassing together today, at least Louis still helped to take the bottom. He had never felt Louis so cute before. Unfortunately, I gambled everything with this demon and evil spirit today and ultimately lost. Mr. Stewart is too strong, even if he is sealed, he still feels powerless when facing it. We can't win at all. Everything is over, and after today, none of them will have any good fruit to eat. At this moment, Osiris's face was also pale. She watched Louis perform on stage, feeling dizzy in her mind and almost fainting. She actually believed Louis. It's over now, everything is over, Louis cheated in public. My career as a professor has come to an end. But not long after, Ostica suddenly widened her eyes and realized that the spell Louis was reciting was not the one she had given him. This fool even copied the spell wrong. Oh my goodness. Unlike everyone else, Mr. Stewart's face in the mirror was extremely strange. He had just tried to spread his shadow through the mirror into the person's heart, and in his mind reading, he searched for that person's fear, so that his nightmare seed could thrive in that person's heart. But that person's heart seems to only have excitement and curiosity. Okay, excitement and curiosity are also possible. As long as there are intense emotional fluctuations in the heart, the seeds can slowly sprout. Whether it's arrogance, greed, fear, extreme, anger, or sadness, they can all be exploited. But not long after, Stewart found that the person's heart was suddenly like a stagnant water, unable to decipher any emotions or thoughts through mind reading. At that moment, Stewart suddenly came up with an incredible trick, which was not a curse, but a mental technique of self-sealing. Brain sealing. Brain sealing surgery. This is impossible. Stewart was a bit panicked, trying to make his nightmare seed burst out and disturb the person's soul, but found himself unable to control the nightmare seed anymore. Suddenly, Stewart looked at the person in front of the mirror who was reciting the small note seriously, and a cold sweat broke out from all over his body. What kind of bookworm who only knows how to read? This is a true wizard. What scares Stewart even more is that the nightmare seed he planted before grew just right. Unable to erupt, but there was someone who could use this seed to constantly grasp him, cast a retreat spell, and make himself unable to escape. Everything is like that person intentionally letting the seed spread and grow in their heart, and then sealing off their own brain. Stewart suspected that it was a coincidence, but the situation was too late for him to think much. He quickly hid the nightmare seed to avoid being discovered by the person. However, just then, he suddenly saw the wizard outside the mirror, showing a strange smile at himself. Did he catch me? Stewart widened his eyes in disbelief and said, "Did he catch me? Damn it." He suddenly came to the mirror and slapped it hard. The assessment is over. It's over. Let that guy stop. But to Stewart's despair, the crowd in the hall burst into laughter as a result. He felt like a poor prisoner trapped in prison with his hands locked. Someone had tricked him into coming to the railing and grabbed him by the neck, beating him hard. And the examiner who should have helped himself is still smiling foolishly. Mr. Stewart. No one can help you anymore. A sudden sound echoed deep in Stewart's heart, and his scalp exploded. His nightmare seed has been completely controlled. Then Stuart saw a burst of strong light, and in that light, an uncontrollable fear spread out in his heart. He let out a heart-wrenching scream, and in confusion, he began to run around in the mirror. Just like Luffy before. This scene made Asticulus and Luffield both widen their eyes fiercely, while the laughter in the hall grew louder and louder. Many noblewomen who came to watch the excitement were still wiping their tears with handkerchiefs. I thought this was another prank created by Mr. Stuart in the mirror. Obviously, no one can help Mr. Stuart who has already become desperate. Until the bright light appeared for the second time, the professors of the Academy School rubbed their eyes fiercely. A white phoenix shone from the wand in the boy's hand. This is the effect of the exorcism spell. A sealed nightmare. This kind of opportunity is really hard to find even with a lantern on. Lewis shook his slightly sore arm, looked at the +1 retreat curse mastery, in the narration, continued to wave his wand, and recited the retreat curse for the third time. He is going to practice this exorcism spell to LV2 today. As the spell was recited once again, Osiris and Luffield both stared blankly at Lewis, and then saw with their own eyes the magical radiance shining out of Lewis's wand once again. When the radiance of the white phoenix once again enveloped the mirror, the person in the mirror, whose footsteps were about to stop, once again began to run wildly. Just like Terrace who just ran wildly under the stage. At this moment, the laughter in the hall had become intermittent, and even Helen stopped crying, staring blankly at the mirror. Only some noblewomen who don't understand magic are still giggling foolishly. It wasn't until the beams of light continued to shine on the wand that the hall gradually became audible. At this moment, there is a silence both below and on stage. Only the voice of the clown chanting the curse on stage remained. And the mournful and desperate cries and pleadings of the evil spirit in the mirror. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Jokes. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Jokes. The clown solemnly recited and waved the spell, like a bookworm reciting a text in front of an ordinary mirror. Occasionally he would even look at the small note in his hand. This appearance is like a clumsy first-grade student, assessing daily spells, creating a strong contrast with the radiance of his wand and the heart-wrenching and screaming demon-level evil spirit in the mirror. Amidst the flickers of light, everyone widened their eyes, staring blankly at the stage, suspecting whether they were dreaming. Like these people, Luffy also grabbed his hair fiercely, suspecting whether he was dreaming. That's right, I must have been under the nightmare curse. It must be. He. The exorcism spells were recited faster and faster, and the white phoenix flickered like a light bulb, almost unable to elicit a response. When the white phoenix flickered for the 7th time, the examiner finally realized and fiercely grabbed Lewis's wand, saying, "Mr. Lewis, that's enough. That's enough." But the curse did not stop until it was almost finished reciting. The evil spirit in the mirror ran out of the room in the mirror world, not knowing where it had gone. Can it still be like this? It seems that we need to find a way to prevent it from running away next time. This kind of sealed evil spirit cannot be found even by making lanterns. Taking a glance at the Curse of Retreat LV2 in the narration, Lewis withdrew his thoughts and straightened his body again amidst the thousands of dull gazes. Just like when he first stepped on stage, he stood up to greet every direction below, but this time, no one laughed. A dead silence fell. Everyone. In this silence, Lewis spoke out the joke he often tells when Louis VI is mocked. Knowledge is a lamp, its power far exceeds a few curses. This is the philosophy I have always adhered to, and I am grateful to my mentor. She did not give up on me as a stubborn student because of this, but instead taught me according to my aptitude and gave me different guidance. Let's work together to create a miracle. I don't think I'm a mute. It's just that the way my former teacher taught me has always been a bit wrong. Although the teacher you mentioned is far away from home, the local professor's favorability towards you greatly decreased after listening to these words. However, they developed a great interest in Asticulus. Even amazed, as you wished, you used another method to make a splash and successfully threw the blame on your own teacher. Your brilliant performance became reasonable. Oshikris will take over this pot, you may need some explanation later. Although you failed your assessment due to cheating, there will definitely be a make.up exam in the future to silence the voices of those who question you. If you successfully pass the make.up exam 2 months later, you may teach under the title of lecturer. As for Oshikris, her teaching style has been proven in you. Perhaps after that, her mentor, Dean Oliver, will agree to her previous application for the position of Director of Education at Yodel College. Rows of narratives appeared in front of Lewis, and he didn't have time to read more. He stood up in all directions to greet the audience, and then walked off the stage. Watching Lewis slowly walk down the stage, the audience below blushed and fell silent. The joke that Louis VI told today has been told many times in these 6 years. These words, like Carnegie's famous sayings, were spread as jokes. This made the names of Osticus, the teacher, and her students widely known through laughter. But this time, no one could laugh out loud. Everyone present blushed and felt like pins and needles, and Lewis's words seemed to strike their faces, making them want to leave this embarrassing place immediately. Waves of crisp applause suddenly rang out, breaking the silence in the hall. It was Osticus. Obviously, the matter was not over yet, and Osticus repaired her knife. The quiet applause was clear and loud, like slaps, fiercely slapping the faces of those who came here today to watch the commotion. Some nobles have already covered their faces. The crystal ball in the arms of a minister shattered directly, and the minister was so frightened that he hid his face and walked away. With Osiris's applause, several branch deans who were attending today all stood up and applauded. Soon, everyone in the hall slowly stood up and gave a warm round of applause. The applause from the professors and deans was sincere, but this scene was really awkward. After hearing the applause, the nobles knew it was a mockery from the professors, but they had to stand up one after another, squeeze out awkward smiles, and applaud with a flushed face. But nobles are nobles. Not long after, some thick-skinned guys straightened their mentality, pretended that nothing had happened, and followed the dean down to flatter Osticus. These nobles who stepped down today are all wall grass. They know that after today, Osticus will definitely receive strong support from the academic school. The attitude of the dean and professors today is a testament. They did not laugh from beginning to end, but applauded warmly in the end. Obviously, Osiris has given these professors a reason to support her. She is qualified to stay at the college. Or, to put it another way, Osticus, who has proven her level today, can now stay in the college as it is. No one will talk nonsense anymore, and the college doesn't have to bear the pressure of public opinion. After all, marrying this princess into the dragon clan is politically correct. The Holy Oak Wizard is the most famous white wizard in the world, and even when a witch sees Principal Oliver, she has to bow her head and respectfully call out teacher. Now everything is in order, with St. Oak College protecting Osiris, the princess is as if she has won a gold medal in avoiding death. As the most important inheritor of Sorrento, Osiris clearly understands what it means for the future once she can remain safely within the kingdom. This throne will eventually belong to her, so the attitude of the nobles immediately changed. Osticus has finally overcome the difficulties today, and as the deans looked at Osticus and Lewis, their eyes were filled with amazement. The professors were greatly surprised by today's incident. Lewis's handling of that demon and evil spirit was astonishing. Many professors have seen the way. He deceived the evil spirit, lured it to plant the nightmare seed in his heart, then closed himself, constantly releasing the retreat curse on that seed, which made the flawless mirror demon full of loopholes. Mr. Stewart is indeed very powerful, but in the eyes of a true wizard, it is sealed and sealed like a castrated kitten. But what he is facing today is not just a demon, but also the interference of those who are watching the excitement in the Witch Queen faction. But he remained calm in the face of danger. On the other hand, Luffield and Terrace, who were expected by the professors, fell off the chain under this pressure. Without a doubt. What everyone present today sees is a true, calm, and composed wizard. And a true wizard, even if he only knows one magic, his power is endless. Because he has the power of knowledge. This is the real wizard. How many years have passed, and how many generations of wizards have been able to calm down and study hard? Young people nowadays are too restless. Dare to step on stage if you can't even distinguish between demons, misfortunes, and evil spirits. Dare to use string puppets and captivating without even understanding the basic theory. The so-called bookworm and Louis VI, in the eyes of professors, has now become a rich scholar. His level of knowledge is enough to earn the title of St. Oak Bachelor. A bachelor is the true wizard. A person who only knows magic without knowledge is a magician. Indeed, that curse was not Lewis's, it was written by Osticus, but his performance today is enough to attract the attention of the professors. Of course, if he could write this kind of curse, he would probably have to ask a question carefully. However, it doesn't seem like his body has been occupied by some extraterrestrial souls. Professors can't help but feel a bit regretful. Often, some extraterrestrial souls occupy the body of the deceased, which is an excellent research material. Of course, the most stunning thing today is still Osticulus. That exorcism spell is so ingenious. I have reached the level of a master. What a shock. As for saying, this curse was created by Lewis. No one believes that the white phoenix is a symbol of Osticus. What level of wizard can write a spell representing someone else's symbol? Perhaps only Principal Oliver, sir. This is already an extraordinary level of cognitive ability, obviously written by Osticus. It seems that Osiris really intends to focus on studying magic. This spell alone is enough for her to leave a mark in the history of magic. Osiris was also shocked beyond measure. That spell is exquisitely crafted, and the writer's level has reached an extremely high level. The only person she can imagine is probably Principal Oliver. Who gave Lewis this curse? Or did he write it himself? For these questions, Osticus can only hold them in her stomach now. And he picked up the pot thrown by Lewis. Don't forget to flatter your teacher Principal Oliver, by the way. Even though that little yodel hasn't come yet. But he will hear it. Knowledge, everyone, knowledge. Osticus smiled and said to the professors around her, nowadays, many new generations are no longer as immersed in knowledge as the old generation. I have always remembered Oliver's teachings and implemented his philosophy. Louis VI. Lewis has laid a solid foundation over the past 6 years, and today the effect of accumulating knowledge is reflected. Like the professors, Osiris was generous in praising her student Lewis, as if she had been guiding him instead of releasing him for so many years. Ah, a hypocritical woman. Anyway, Lewis's small help was enough to fulfill the wish that Osiris had made to the male god in her heart. To help her stay in college. After today, with the recognition and support of the academic school, Osiris will begin to take root completely at St. Oak College and develop her strong branches and sprouts. Lewis is no exception. He found that his sense of presence had exceeded 60. This seems to indicate that he has started to take root in the college. Just as he was about to flip through his storybook and take a look at his rewards, a voice interrupted his thoughts. Could you please find some recommended tickets? I really need this one, please book friends. And if book lovers like it, don't forget to bookmark it. End of this chapter.